Greetings again to everyone. It is very unusual to be speaking to an empty hall, and it is unusual when the timing of the conference is out of balance. Usually conferences go over time. This time we caught up. All of the panels will start on time, and we will try to keep within the time limits. As I said before, if you would like to ask questions, please register into www.slido.com. The code is V as in Victor SF21. We will try to take as many questions as possible in the time that is allotted. There's an old saying that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The two world wars in the 20th century were supposed to be the wars that end all wars. That finality is now difficult to imagine as the world's population has grown several times. Technologies have developed at a pace never imagined, even by science fiction writers. And conflicts, violence, and social upheaval have made the world unpredictable. There's an old Latin saying, in order to ensure peace, prepare for war. The next panel discussion, the topic is the role of the civil society in ensuring security and civil protection. The moderator, who I would like to introduce right now, is Aidas Petrosius, who is a political consultant and media expert. For almost 20 years, he has been a journalist of politics, economics, and defense. And as a political consultant, Mr. Petrosius helped to plan and execute more than a dozen electoral political campaigns, including the successful presidential campaign in 2003 here in Lithuania. He is a regular lecturer and consultant to independent media about reforms in governments and democracies of the post-Soviet republics or countries. As a subject matter expert on social political dynamics, Mr. Petrosius took part in planning and executing a series of military exercises for NATO and Lithuanian armed forces. And he currently heads the business development sector of the media analysis and research company Mediaskopas. We will have 3 panel members discussing in this next panel, and I would like to invite Mr. Petrosius to introduce them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pemkos, for your kind introduction. Indeed, world has changed quite a bit since the last Vilnius Security Forum, and that no doubt will be reflected in our today's panel on the role of civil society in ensuring security and civil protection. We all are witness of how global pandemic has impacted states and societies as a major threat on its own. But also this pandemic is a platform for both malicious hybrid activities internationally and a pretext to encroach upon human rights by illiberal governments within their own borders. Today, we have an opportunity to explore 3 quite unique perspectives presented here by our panelists, political commentator and columnist, Mr. Constantin Egert, political expert, Dr. Pavel Usov, and an expert in biohazard prevention, Dr. Michał Bijak. We will kick off our panel with introductory speech of each panelist, followed shortly by the discussion and follow-up questions from the audience. I encourage all of you watching us on YouTube or participating via Teams in this conference to engage in our discussion by putting forth your questions on the Slido platform so I can bring it to the panelists. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Pavel Usov, who's an expert in neo-authoritarian regime of Belarus. Dr. Usov is an advisor for political affairs and national anti-crisis management, as well as lecturer in Warsaw University. He is also head of the Center of Political Analysis and Prognosis. So, Dr. Pavel Usov, the floor is yours. Please switch on your camera and mic Thank you.
Thank you, Aidas. I hope everybody see me. So thank you for, first of all, for organizing this conference. It's on my mind a very important conference, taking into the consideration what is going on around Lithuania and what had happened in Belarus and still happening in Belarus this last year. And really, it was absolutely right that technology today playing an important role in political and social process all over the world, and especially in Belarus. Technology and using of technology, especially network, different informational channel, so-called Telegram channel, what is very popular all over post-Soviet countries, and especially in authoritarian countries like Russia or like Belarus. And all of these technologies took an important role in forming what I call a new type of civil society. It's brought to digitalization of the civil society, and we may say even networkization of the civil society, because digitalization and using of the communication in wide scale is the only way for own civil society protection, and also for fighting and resisting to the authoritarian regime. For that moment, as we following events in Belarus, we saw that it's very difficult to resist political repression and actually to political terror. And the only way to protect people, to protect civic political group in Belarus and even in Russia, it's to communicate via internet, via network, and internet network group, social internet group plays a role for solidarity, mobilization, and coordination of society. And for example, Belarusian elections in 2020 and the aftermath of this election showed how was an important role of new channels of communication for mobilization, for activization of the society, and even for organization of mass protest in Belarus during summer, autumn 2022, and even now. So, and thanks or due to this important event election, civil society in Belarus transformed into the new type of civic society. The many new political and social communities had been formed thanks to using of digital instrument, digital channels. And for example, for that moment, there are thousands of different Telegram groups which communicate between each other. There are different digital platforms which is used for activating society. One of the well-known digital platform, it's a voice, Golos, which used for mobilization of the society or for discussion very important issues, questions, as if changes in the Belarusian constitution or organization of the referendum or voting for important issues. Speaking about strictly secure aspects of the civic society in actual situation, I would like to emphasize one of the very important initiative which was possible to be created due and thanks to the new technologies. It's BIPOL, Belarusian police. It's a structure for that moment, semi-political structure was created by the former servicemen of the Belarusian militia or investigation council and other force structures. For that moment, they are situated in Warsaw, and the activity related to investigation of the criminal cases against a representative of the Belarusian society, murders, killing, torturing of the Belarusian protester, killing, for example, killing of the Traikovsky, who was killed in August 2020 by Belarusian secret services, quite possible by KGB, or murdering of one of the protesters, Roman Bondarenko, in autumn 2020. They investigated all these cases. They almost identified the people who were related to this killing and spreading information related to these cases. What it was absolutely impossible without interconnection, without active communication between these structures and people who are still in Belarus. It's one of the clear example of activity of this representative of new groups of the civic society, and it's very important for Belarus because also this initiative related to BIPOL involved in preparing, in working out of the concept of reform of the force structures or Ministry of Domestic Affairs, which is very important for democratization and transformation of the Belarusian system in future, because anyway, force structure will play important role in democratic country, and we need new structures. It is one of the clear example of the profits of the using technologies and interchanging of the information. Another moment, it's a high level of solidarity. It was also the result of activating Belarusian society during the election 2020. And here I would like to mention two initiatives, very important, which is shown the high level of the activity and solidarity in Belarusian society. It is initiative by SOL, Belarusian Solidarity, which actually this platform was created during beginning of the COVID epidemic in Belarus, and many of us probably know that Belarusian state absolutely, totally ignored the problem of COVID during its beginning in February and March of 2020, and ignoring of this problem under deliberate understatement about the situation, government deliberately hidden figures. They manipulated with the figures of people who was infected by COVID or who dies with this infection. And Lukashenko says that there is no any viruses here because we do not see them. And medical system, healthcare system in Belarus was not ready for resistance to the COVID. And actually, civic groups in Belarus started a campaign for gathering money for Belarusian medics, buying masks, buying costumes, and also this platform was very active in objective estimation of the situation with COVID in Belarus. And it was one of the examples how society united in case of state weakness, state disability, and how the society was solid in their will to solve the problem. And this platform gathering money, as I mentioned, for medics. Later, after election 2020, this platform transformed to By Soul, a platform who gathering money, collecting money to help people who suffered from repression, who were arrested, and who need help. And they collected a lot of money, and it was very helpful. It's one of the example, a quick, rapid process of the solidarity and acting of the society in Belarus. Another moment, again, due to using new technology, it's a high level of activation of Belarusian diaspora in foreign countries. I have never saw that so many Belarusians was involved in political process, was involved in aspects related to the helping those people who were suffered from repression. A community, diaspora Belarusian before 2020, they were not very active. There were a few political or social groups outside of Belarus, in Poland, for example, or in Lithuania. But after election, thanks to the communications, the Belarusian community activated everywhere, even in Japan. Even thanks to the activity of Belarusian community in Japan, many Japanese media transmitted information about events in Belarus. It was fantastic. We have Belarusian active community in Brazil. And for that moment, this community activated and formed so-called popular embassies in 14 countries. It's in some way it's alternative for official embassies, and this alternative, these communities try to spread objective information about what is going on in Belarus, because official embassies, of course, understatement the situation, they false information, and so on. So it's two very important initiatives which shows the activizations of Belarusian society and creation of the new type, absolutely new type of the civic society in Belarus, because of course we have traditional or usual groups, common groups of the Belarusian people who were active before 2020. These groups, civic society groups, which was presented traditional opposition and were related with the fighting against the regime during 26 years. It's human rights defense centers, Belarusian Helsinki Committee, different social initiatives, but they were not able to activate society on a such high level. And but they were not able to activate society on a such high level. And but they were not able to activate society on a such high level. And
excuse me, would you care to switch off your microphones, anyone who is not speaking at the moment? Thank you. And would you care to switch off your microphones, anyone who is not speaking at the moment? Thank you. And would you care to switch off your microphones, anyone who is not speaking at the moment? Apparently, we are encountering some technical difficulties, but Dr. Usov, would you care to try to continue with your presentation? Encountering some technical. I think we are good to continue. Please, Mr. Usov, switch on your microphone and continue your speech.
So I'm almost finished. I just want to say that this activization, which deals with the activization of the Belarusian society, will bring to the changes in Belarus anyway. This year or next year, I clearly see that Belarusian society is absolutely ready for changes, and it's ready to take responsibility for the new Belarus. And it is absolutely fantastic to following what is going on in Belarus. Of course, we have a lot of dramatic events, dramatic cases in Belarus, killed people, tortured people, but society as itself is mobilized, is activated, and it is ready for reforms and for changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pavelosov. I'll come back to you with more questions, asking for more details during the discussion part of our panel. And now I would like to introduce our second speaker here, Dr. Michał Bijak of Łódź University in Poland. Mr. Bijak is a professor and the head of the Biohazard Prevention Center at the University of Łódź. He's a renowned expert on chemical, biological, and radionuclear threats, as well as a trusted advisor to the government of Poland and European Commission. Mr. Bijak, I would like to ask you to switch on your camera and microphone, and please go forth with your introductory presentation.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to this very important initiative, which is Vilnius Security Forum. Yes, it's the shame that we need to be present on the online. Better will be face to face, but I hope in the next year we will have the possibility to meet in the normal functionality. I think that the Vilnius Forum is very important initiative for the Central and Eastern Europe countries, as well as I think for the Baltic Sea countries, because it's increasing the collaboration of experts of some organization and governmental institution to increase the security of our neighbors. Yes, this is a very important initiative. Currently, we are the witness of very, I can say, hard times, yes, for each country, not only for the Europe, but also for the other countries. Even the US has a big problem. And the pandemic has impacted on each country, and even after when we will win this fight, we will have long-term impact, yes. Somebody called this impact the time which will be the post-COVID times or post-COVID area, yes. And I think that this pandemic will be experience which will left with us for many years, and many of behavior, many of activities will be something in like standards. For example, very often the people was looking for the people from the Korean, Asian, Japanese, why they wear the masks, yes? So I think that the mask will left with us also within the next few years, even after the COVID will be not danger for the people. Okay, I have prepared a short presentation about the COVID disinformation, which in my opinion is a real threat for the civil society, because many information which is present on the social media, on the website, are very often misleading and correct, and the verification of this information is very poor. So I will share the screen with my presentation, and I will switch off for this presentation my camera to have a better stream. Okay. Do you see my presentation?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So once again, thank you for the invitation. As I have been introduced, I am head of Biohazard Prevention Center at the Faculty of Biology and Environmental Protection of the University of Lodz, and I would like to demonstrate and say a few words about the COVID-19 fake news, which is potential threat for civil society. What we can talk about the COVID-19 pandemic, yes? The new coronavirus began to spread around the world in late 2019. Some probes from Europe suggest that it can be earlier, but there is no clear evidence about that. So we are thinking that we are now the statement that in the late autumn, the first patient was in the Wuhan, in the Hubei province in the China, and the local health service reported the very new case of patient with different pneumonia of unknown origin and the symptoms. The symptoms was typical for viral pneumonia, but there were additional symptoms which start to giving information that we can have a new type of the virus, new type of pneumonia syndrome. So the first ideas was about the MERS or SARS-CoV-1, but the genetic isolation of the virus demonstrated that this is new type of the coronavirus type. Okay. And following this time, the virus spreading around the whole world, and on 11 March of 2003, the WHO officially announced the pandemic in the world and named the COVID-19 the coronavirus disease. Yes. Also, they give the official name of the virus, the SARS-CoV-2. And since the December 2019, when the virus appeared for the first time, the virus has spread to over 200 countries. According to WHO reports, there's 219 countries and territories now infected by the virus. And according to the same reports, which I checked yesterday, over 126 million people were contaminated by PCR tests, and the WHO documented more than 2,760,000,000 of deaths. So this is a very serious situation, and COVID-19 is a very dangerous disease, which demonstrating around 2.5% of deaths. Since the pandemic arose, many new websites, online and social media, including all social medias like Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, have continuously updating and discussing the situation on the world. We can say that the COVID-19 pandemic is the live streaming pandemic, because each governmental research community using social media to update the outbreak situation in real time. For example, even our governmental information and reports are updating on each day on the Twitter of the Ministry of Health. So the report is given by the Twitter, yes. And the increasing popularity of social media allow to that the one person opinion and beliefs can spread across the world and can be sharing by thousands or even millions of people. Yes, that's leads to the situation with different websites and social media plays a major role in disseminating of false information related to virus, vaccines, as well as of the disease, of the prevention of disease. And even the WHO called COVID-19 pandemic are infodemic because many information which are present in the websites, online and social media are typical, misleading, and in my opinion, this activities, this live streaming of COVID-19 pandemic is ideal tool for hybrid threat. What we can say about the origin? The evidence point of origin of the, of course, virus SARS-CoV-2. The evidence point to a natural origin for the virus, the overcoming the interspecific barrier. Probably it was overcoming from bats to the humans because the sequence of the virus genome demonstrated very large similarity to bats coronavirus, which is natural in the environment. But of course, on the internet, there is many theories about this virus, which are misleading the people and demonstrate some fake news. One of these theories that the virus was engineered in the laboratory by the Wuhan Institute of Virology, and the spread of the virus was results of not proper procedures which were present on this laboratory. So one of the theory which was very popular at the start of the pandemic. One of the theory which was presented, I think, in the September was that the American scientists selling the virus to the China. Yes, the virus was engineered in the US, and after that, one of the universities selling this virus to China for the spread. One of the theories also that this virus SARS-CoV-2 is similar to HIV virus, and there was also publication prepared by the Indian Institute of Technology, but it was very quick withdrawal about that because the genetic analysis do not confirm that, and it was a typical false information. One of the theory is also about the pandemic was planned to reduce the human population, or for the created by the billionaires for get the money from vaccines, or for the proper personal protective equipment selling. And I saw also the theory that 5G caused the COVID-19 pandemic because the 5G is able to change DNA of many virus, and changes of the DNA of virus in the nature, and SARS-CoV-2 is results of this type of mutation caused by the 5G. Of course, without the theories about the origin, there's many conspiracy theories. Yes, first is that the virus does not exist. We see many of people who are anti-COVIDs, and they opposed to the many restrictions. And I think in each country we have problem with that the people don't believe that the virus is existing. Second is that masks which we need to wear are tool for killing people using carboxy dioxide, because when we are breathing by the mask, we are breathing by our carboxy dioxide, then we will die by this. Another conspiracy theory that the special panic which is created by the government and by the health institution is created by billionaires to reach the money. Yes. The next theory is about the creating fear to introducing the society invigilation tools. Yes, some people believe that the governmental institution want to invigilate people and prepare the restriction, lockdowns, and other types of prevention to create new invigilation tools. I saw also that the people don't believe that this virus is dangerous. This is some citation. Yes, I am young, so this virus can hurt me, or this virus, it is no worse than the flu. Each of this type of citation is very popular in internet and makes that many people can believe in that and stop for the protection of themselves, so what is very, very dangerous for the society. The next problem is the fake news about the vaccination. I think that everybody knows that the vaccination is one of the best way to prevent the disease. And based on the WHO estimation, vaccines are able to save between 2 to 3 million lives every year. So this is a very important way to save the people and prevent the spread of disease and stop the pandemic. Currently, the status was updated on the 22nd of March 2021. On the world, we have 13 different vaccines which have been authorized or approved for emergency use in different countries, and 58 potential candidates for the vaccines which are on the second or third clinical trials phase. So this is also very important business because analysis demonstrated that the vaccine players will split around 100 billions in sales and 40 billions of dollars in different profits in the future. So we see that the vaccination is not only the health problem, but also some issue which can be something like ball in play between different players to reach a lot of money in the sales of the vaccines. Yes. What we can say about fake news, which are spreading and sharing by the internet? Yes. One of the most popular, which has been spread by the internet, was the vaccines will alter our DNA, which is typical fake news because each of the vaccines are special created to do not replicate in our cells, only when even the messenger RNA is introduced into our cells, there is no possibility to copy them and incorporate to our DNA. Yes. Next, very popular theory was the vaccines will implant microchips into people, and this will give possibility to invigilation or even scaring the people. There was many information about some people died during the vaccination trials. Yes, there was information that one of the volunteers of Oxford, in the Oxford the third clinical trial phase had died. There was also fake news. Was also information that one nurse died in Alabama after getting the vaccination. Yes, the other fake news which we can found in the internet, that is Bill Gates believed that the huge number of people will die from taking the COVID-19 vaccines. It was some preparing special interview, which was, of course, the fake interviews with and spread by the internet. There was also information that the Spanish flu vaccine was responsible for 50 million of deaths, what is very great example of fake news, because the first vaccine against the flu was discovered in 1937. And for this finding, Jonas Salk got the Nobel Prize in 1951. So during the Spanish flu pandemic, there was no available any vaccine against the flu. One of the information was also about the COVID vaccines causes the infertility in women. It was split by different countries, different media, and probably there was something like negative campaign against one of the producer of the vaccine, and very popular theory that this vaccine give you a COVID-19, what is also fake news, because at this moment we have no available vaccine which are based on the real virus SARS-CoV-2. Everything is based on the vectors or genetic material of this virus to produce the proteins in our cells. But unfortunately, the people make real-life decisions based on such fake news, which is very dangerous for the civil society because, you know, everybody knows that the bad or something like good sounds, the information are spreading faster than typical research information, yes? And about this information about vaccines, one of the US think tank, the German Marshall Fund, have presented large analysis about the huge disinformation campaign against Pfizer vaccine. Probably this campaign was related to something like concurrence between different countries and different vaccines and access to the Asia and Africa market. There was also huge panic, even in the Europe, related to the information about the AstraZeneca is associated with an increased risk of blood clotting disorders. There was information that the AstraZeneca can cause the thrombus formation, but also this information was also not verified, and the European Medical Agency demonstrated report that the AstraZeneca is safe, and now I hope that this panic is decreasing because there was examples that even 70% of people who have the date of the vaccination not appear in the points for the vaccine because they don't want AstraZeneca. So there was a real problem based on this information. How we can protect the civil society? First, in my opinion, is introduce some governmental regulation about the fake news appear and give some tools for the fight against fake news by the governmental institution. Next, of course, the education and spreading the truthful information and demonstration to the population about the benefits of vaccine, of course, on the voluntary basis. But I am also suggest to introduce the green passports, because the green passports will be maybe one of the points which can increase the number of persons who want to go, for example, for the vacation without any restriction, and for this reason will only go for the vaccination. Yes. Next idea is to campaign to increase the trust of citizens for governmental action and official statements, because everybody knows that people don't like to trust for information spread by the governmental institution as well as the public bodies. And the next point is increasing collaboration by different media, scientists, non-governmental organization, and other health and informational center organization to reduce sharing of the fake news or disinformation. In my opinion, sometimes should be some consultation or even the contact points by the specialists and journalists, which will reduce the fake news spreading to the online media. I am also very interesting about demonstrating the results of good practice of vaccination which have been introduced in the UK and Israel. We see how this country reduced the new cases of COVID-19 during the large-scale vaccination. Yes, in the UK, I think in the early January and February was around 60 to 70 new cases in each day. Now it is around 5,000 new cases each day. And of course, we can say that there is a result of the lockdowns and restrictions, but then, in my opinion, this is a good example of the power of the vaccination. Similar we can say about the Israel, yes. Now there is around 500 or 600 new cases in each day, when in the peak of the third wave of the pandemic, they have around 7,000. So we see 90% decrease in the new cases in each day, what is, in my opinion, results of the mass-scale vaccination process. And what we need to also not show is the panic, because when somebody is panicking, the panic is sharing dynamically between the people, yes? So each organization, governmental authorities should do not show any panic to civil society, because this is very dangerous to spread the fake news and disinformation. Thank you very much. I hope that this presentation was not boring for you and demonstrate how the COVID situation and the live streaming of this pandemic is making also dangers for the civil society, and can be also demonstrated like hybrid threat for the civil society and the tool for the different action against organization, against governmental institution by other countries or organizations. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bijak. It was very interesting to hear from you, especially knowing that you spent most of your time on the front lines of the fight against pandemic in Poland. So thank you very much once again. Please stick with us just for a bit for a discussion piece. And for now, I would like you to meet our third panelist, who is Mr. Constantin Egert. And Mr. Egert is a well-known name among Russian and international audience. He writes a weekly column and hosts an interview program on Germany's public broadcaster Deutsche Welle. Before that, Mr. Egert used to work for the most prominent independent Russian media outlets such as TV Dozhd or TV Rain and Kommersant, the oldest private independent media outlet in Russia. As well, Mr. Egert was a head of Moscow Bureau of BBC Russian service. So without further ado, Mr. Egert, the floor is yours. Please make sure you switched on your microphone. Thank you.
I'm sorry. Labas rytas, good morning. I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation to speak at the conference, which is definitely unusual this year, even for someone who is used to speaking to different audiences. This empty hall feels a bit lonely. But I would like to, thanks for the introduction, Petras, but I would like to stress that I speak only for myself. I'm a freelance journalist, so basically I'm only expressing my own views. And I had certain things to say, but having listened to the presentations of Professor Rusov and Professor Bijak, I changed it on the hope, and would like to offer some of my very probably raw and rough views on civic society and its security in the modern age, which is an age amazing in its fluidity and in its technological change, which also brings societal and I would even dare say moral change to the world, to societies across the globe. And I would actually like to start with a question, that Professor Biak asked towards the end of his presentation. How can we protect the civic society from, well, whatever the threats that threaten civic societies? It's very interesting that, first of all, I think we shouldn't conflate society and civic society. These are two different things. Societies, by definition, are wider than civic societies, which are essentially the most active part of society, people who are engaged in civic, societal, political, or any other charity and stuff like that, or any other action, people who try to impact the world around them. And another thing which actually slightly irked me is this question: how can we protect this civic society from whatever threats that threaten civic society? I mean, interesting, it's a question that it's in a very EU question, if you understand what I mean. I don't think that in the United States, for example, this would be a relevant question, because there is no, it's not ingrained in the mind of the public and public intellectuals that we, essentially the state, people who lead, should do something to the benefit of societies without societies actually asking the societies. I think we should ask the societies whether the societies want to be protected. And I think we have a very mixed picture, especially after this last year. I think that if we're talking about democracies of the West, members of the global West, I'm not only speaking about NATO and the EU, then definitely there are hybrid threats emanating from especially authoritarian regimes across the globe, which should be countered. How? It's a different question. But first and foremost of all, I think there should be, if you wish, a recognition that there is an external threat. And I think COVID-19 especially showed that adversaries of the West, and that is Putin's Russia, even more so Xi Jinping's China, are going all the way to split and weaken Western democracies. And this should be recognized in very certain terms, in no uncertain terms. Such regimes, I also would like to add Iranian regime, of course, to that. Such regimes have no scruples, no notion of common good, which to a large extent unites the West and especially the European Union. And of course, you remember just a few years ago, it was popular to speak about China as a potentially responsible global stakeholder. No, it isn't. And this should be plainly stated. It's very difficult to protect civic societies when, let us say, some European governments say, yes, I mean, it's very bad for China to intervene via massive social media campaigns against those who criticize China in our societies, to promote their worldview via disinformation and massive troll attacks and cyber espionage, and at the same time say, well, we, the EU, we are going to sign this massive investment protection agreement without even consulting with our American allies. I think that this idea that somehow you can sit on two chairs with regard to such regimes is just abominable, and it's plain wrong. Same goes for, let's say, Nord Stream 2, which is getting more and more attention, it has been getting more and more attention over the last year. In Germany, where more and more people see it for what it is, not just an economic project, but it took quite a long time to convince the German political class to wake up, to some extent, by the way, because of civic society, including the media and including political parties acting towards this goal. So I think clear identification is an important thing. Secondly, I think that we've been talking for years about the crisis of Western democracy. And I think that this crisis after COVID, we really see that it's come to a head. There is a decrease in trust in democratic institutions and Western alliances among publics. And that goes, well, concerns more the EU countries rather than the US, but that also exists there. I think that just repeating platitudes from the past won't help here. I don't have a ready answer, but definitely answering challenges that societies at large think are important is something that needs to be taken on board. For example, the issue of immigration is because of the French, that's my personal view, because the French political class has been stonewalling about that for decades. We now have a situation in which Marine Le Pen, who wants to take France out of NATO and who's a best friend of Vladimir Putin, may become president next year. These societies will know what concerns them, and this should be addressed. It's another question how, but it should be addressed. I think that, for example, if you look at the same time, it was been happening in Denmark recently with the actually social democratic government taking steps to dismantle this kind of ethnic immigrant ghettos by concise societal action, by laws, by doing something about, with the help, by the way, of civic society. That is probably not a bad example. Another thing is the media. We are living, as a journalist, I can tell you, we are living in a society which is very much fragmented. You know it. There is no longer just 2 TV channels to watch and 3 newspapers to read. Everyone can get what one wants at a click of one's iPhone. We can do nothing about it. There's been a point of no return that's been passed. But I think that, in a sense, civic societies provide answers. When you heard Pavel Usov that's been speaking about this kind of horizontal networks of people reading and communicating on Telegram channels, that is something that we need to pay attention to. Also in the age where people feel that they always have a chance to listen to the opinion they like without having to listen to the opinion they don't like, which creates ideological ghettos. Here, I think, thought should be given to reinvigorating public service media organizations like the BBC in the UK, or like PBS in the US, or like ARD and CDF in Germany. The issue is how. One needs to recreate a real climate of real debate. And here, by the way, I think public service broadcasters can still play a role, but it needs to be taken to wider audiences via different platforms. No one has a successful answer how to do it, but it's very clear that if there is a task for broadcasters, for media organizations paid for by the taxpayers, it is to provide unfettered debate, maximum debate, because otherwise this debate will be taken over by Putin trolls or Xi Jinping's trolls. Another thing I think for Western societies, the important thing, is the state of academic debate. Let's face it, a lot of things that's been happening over the last 30, 40 years with divisive ideologies like critical race theories and post-colonialism and things like that, they work towards dividing societies into non-communicating, sometimes hostile stratas. This is also a great chance for the authoritarians that want to weaken the global West and in the end subjugate it. Look at how China uses the rhetoric of critical race theory in trying to eliminate intellectual voices that speak out against Chinese dictatorship in the West. So I think because a lot of universities are state universities, you can't interfere in private ones, then probably if you're talking about civic society and the role of the state, it is probably the role of the state to ensure wide, non-censored intellectual debate in universities. Only in such circumstances, actions against hostile propaganda machines like the Chinese broadcasters or Russian broadcasters will have any effect, because it will be compensated by widening democracy at home. Now that's the West. But if you look at civic societies in authoritarian countries, as Pavel Osov did with regard to Belarus, then it's a completely different picture. Their civic societies should be protected from the state. I do agree that this new age of social media provided for connectivity between civic society activists and by just people who are interested in what happens in their countries to an extent that was unprecedented. No one of us who remembers the great anti-communist revolutions of the late 80s, early 90s could imagine such type of connectivity. But one has to remember that authoritarian regimes also mastered that. If you look, for example, at the statistics of Russian telegram channels, they are inundated by widely read Kremlin channels which serve amazingly finely tuned propaganda, which is inserted among lots of true facts. So don't think that the social media sphere only belongs to those who want democracy. Also, look, with all due respect to Belarusian activists or to Russian activists, what we've seen, and that is a phenomenon to which, I mean, basically, we can pose questions, we still don't have answers. We've seen these regimes that seem to be completely opposed by at least active parts of civic society, or actually by civic societies in their countries, like the Belarusian regime or like the regime of Vladimir Putin, still remaining in place and still having, well, commanding certainly significant support. It's a passive support, it's hypocritical support, but it means that people, lots of people will not be coming out on the street. Why so? I think it is the nature of post-communist societies which, probably as of now, and that's only my hunch, are taking their time to adjust after the turbulent changes of the end of communism. As opposed to the, say, late 80s, early 90s, there are lots of people that have something to lose, and they will be cautious. They will not just go and demonstrate in front of the presidential palace because they will be afraid for their children, for their mortgage, for their business. We may not like it, but that's exactly the fact. How to inspire them is important. And I think that here, one of the duties of civic societies at large, which is NGOs, public intellectuals, and so on and so forth, is not only to say things are bad, but also to present a convincing picture of a potential future that will be different from, say, Lukashenko's today in Belarus. That is a difficult task, but it's definitely worth trying. And I think that, for example, in this respect, Belarusian activists that basically try to create and are actively creating now this kind of government in exile, they're doing probably the right thing. Because over time, it may take quite some time. This idea that there are people that are ready to take over will sink in the depths of the society, and that's extremely important. In a book entitled Roads to the Temple, an American scholar, Leon Aron, describing the momentous events in the Soviet Union in 1989-91, said that without an idealistic belief that societies can live differently, these changes would not have happened. I do concur. I think it's important for any major societal change. I think that politics is not happening on virtual highways. In the end, politics are about reality. They happen in reality, not in the virtual space. Or rather, they are decided, not in the virtual space. And I think that for civic societies, it is important to understand that and to take the message to the people, not only counting on social media and things like that, but also interacting with people in reality. Also, there needs to be patience. And of course, there needs to be, and I think this is what we've seen with the demonstrations inspired by Alexei Navalny and his team in Russia in this winter, is that over time, people tend to lose their fear, as it was in Belarus too, by the way, and feel that they are united by the idea of common citizenship. That is something that's very important for such societies. And last thing, I've been talking a lot about fake news and conspiracy theories. Look, the first fake news happened in Troy with the famous horse, and it continues till then. Fake news is lies. People have been dealing with that before. I think that the only way to counter it is actually open democratic debate, as I said. The same goes for conspiracy theories. People believe in conspiracy theories, and you can't put a nanny by the side of every person who wants to believe that Bill Gates is behind it or the global Freemasonic government wants to take over tomorrow. In the end, I think that there is only so much that societies can do about that. It existed, it exists, and will continue to exist. But I think that things that I described with regard to academia, public media, and strengthening and opening up, reinventing, if you wish, democracy to some extent, these are the only tools I can think of, maybe for now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Egert. I would like to ask all our panelists to switch on their cameras and microphones. And while you're doing that, I would like to comment on Mr. Egert's observations. I think that the deficit of credibility in the time of crisis is not only the problem for democratic governments, but also for illiberal, autocratic ones. As we can see clearly in the examples of Russia or Belarus, regimes' efforts to vaccinate the population, to convince population to go for vaccination, are encountering quite a big distrust of the population. So I would propose that this problem of distrust is universal, despite the societal order, whether it's democratic, liberal society or illiberal, autocratic state. But let's come back for our discussion. I saw some converging and some conflicting ideas, and following the question from the audience about the tools that could be utilized by civil society to mitigate COVID-related disinformation, I would like to propose this as a first question, what that tool may be. For example, Mr. Biak talked about giving, this overseeing power to deal with disinformation to the government. Mr. Egert proposed that instead of that, public broadcaster, unbiased, unpoliticized public broadcaster could deal with that. And Mr. Usov talked about building trust by public union of public interest. So once again, what would be the tool that would help us to deal with this enormous amount of lies and disinformation during these times? I would like to start with Dr. Usov. Idle?
For a long time, I was a professor in the university and touch students. And this question, how to fight with a lie, not related to the COVID or manipulation in mass media. So the answer is very simple. It's knowledge. If you want to know a truth, if you want to be more informed about the problem related with COVID or with the policy of the government, you have to study, you have to read, you have to educate it. And we are living in a time of great discovery. It's related with the absolutely unlimited access to the information, to the knowledge. You may read everything in internet, not only things which are manipulated with the conscience, with the mind, but philosophic tractates, medical tractates. You have an access to the presentation about COVID, about informational wars, and so on and so on. So the only way it's self-education of the society. And the civic society, and I absolutely agree with Mr. Egert, that the civic society is the most active, has to be most educated part of the society. And if civic society is not educated, if civic society is allowed to be manipulated, what can we say about another part of the society? So it's my answer. Self-education, reading, knowing much about a different kind of government policy. Everything is dependent on the will and of the wish of the people. If they want to be educated, they will be educated. If they want to be manipulated, or if they prefer to be cheated, so they will be cheated.
Thank you, Dr. Usov. By the way, it seems you are using two microphones at once, or you're experiencing some connectivity problems. Please check this out. And coming back to you, Dr. Bijak, you had a question of the tool that could be used by civil society to mitigate disinformation threats.
Well, this is I have similar opinion than my previous speaker, that the education is the main way to stop the spread of the fake news and disinformation. Because when the society has more scientific proofs and is more educated, they will select the proper information. Yes, there is a very important. Additional, I think that the similar, like the people who want to spread the fake news, some organizations should spread or sharing by the social media the positive and educational materials. Yes, something like educational campaign. Prepare something like that. An example of COVID. Yes, with some scientific proof about the origin, with some scientific proof about the vaccination, sharing the good practice from other countries. Yes, something that people can also spread like the fake news. Yes, and will be at the same level of the exciting for the social media operators or the journalists. Next, with what next tool I think, which I mentioned in my presentation, cooperation between journalists and scientific organization. Yes, to verification each information which can be spread, maybe asking for opinions, maybe asking for the interviews about the very important topics. Yes, maybe creating some contact points between the research authorities, health authorities, and the social media operators and the websites operators as well as journalists. I think that the cooperation and educational campaign is the ideal tool to reduce the impact of the fake news. This is my opinion about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Egert, we are talking about education, which we know takes time. And of course, there's, again, the problem of trust in the source that is engaged in that education. Do you see, of course, excuse me, the naivety of my question, do you see any recipes to deal with this global pandemic of distrust that we're experiencing right now?
Look, if I had a recipe, I would have been raking up amazing amounts of money now, giving lectures about it around the world, it being in such a big demand. I don't, but I think naive questions are usually the right ones. And I think that the COVID-19 pandemic showed us that probably there is not so much correlation between the quality of, well, let us say at least school education, which is important because that concerns pretty much everyone. Not everyone goes to earn a BA or MA, and not everyone goes to the university. There is not a direct, at least, correlation between education and results in tackling the pandemic. Well, look at Sweden, for example, which is not, we still don't know whether it was the right path. Look at Germany, where you can't complain about education, but it's not tackling it well as some other countries. I do think, though, that of course good science, biology, education in schools definitely to some extent contributes to people at least understanding what goes on. I also think that what we discovered is that societies that prioritize free enterprise, and that's or earning. Let's even put it in a different way. Post-communist societies that were earning money, were becoming affluent, is important where it's a status symbol. These societies tend to try and disregard the pandemic more. And I think that was very cleverly used by Putin. Essentially, the Russian regime by last spring decided that it's not going to go too far in protecting people. It will be saving the economy, and it will be filling up the coffers. And the society, well, I would say the society went along with that. Because lots of people at the time, you remember, they were saying, we've seen all these horrible videos of dozens and dozens of ambulances lining up to Russian hospitals. We've seen the state of the Russian hospitals, millions of minutes of YouTube videos shot with smartphones. There's going to be a revolution. People are not going to put up with that in Russia. But there's no revolution. People went on with their lives. So I think that there needs to be a deeper look into how societies react to such events. And I think it has a lot to do not only with education, but also with socioeconomic conditions, and I would even say national psychology and national mentality, I don't know how to describe it, it was very clear that some societies prioritize economic well-being over life of compatriots. And this may sound tragic, but that is exactly the phenomenon we need to deal with.
So, and it seems that we won't be able to concoct some universal recipe, universal remedy against that. And coming back to this prevailing idea about the education, for example, in the Baltic states, Estonian and Lithuanian societies are quite media literate, and they are, due to the constant exposure to disinformation, those two nations are considered the most resilient to disinformation or at least propaganda. At the same time, well-educated societies of Western Europe and across Atlantic Ocean are suffering from the insufficient resilience to those hybrid threats. So it seems to me that now we should be talking about national solutions. Either it's something done by the government itself, as Mr. Biak proposed, or by educating active part of the society, civic society, in essence, as Mr. Usov proposed. Yeah, I've just realized that I have left an open question. Okay, we see more questions coming up from the audience, and question to Mr. Egert. Societies are fragmented. Some propagate anti-democratic norms. Some seek support for human rights. How do we decide which concerns are heard and how? Mr. Egert?
Well, it's a major philosophical question that's been asked, and which I'm sure I won't be able to answer in a matter of 2 minutes. Of course, societies are fragmented. I think that an important element is to create new public spaces for debate, which will be open. I think, and this is an important observation to me, actually, as someone who worked for a lot of time in public service media. I'm not saying public service media are an answer to that. It's part of the answer, but not all of it. But I think that people react to trust. I think that if you want to speak about democracy, it needs to be about inspiring trust. And inspiring trust means when you listen to people, including the people you disagree with. And probably in a broader spectrum. I think that this is probably potentially less of a problem for the United States, where you have a First Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees a very wide remit of free speech. In Europe, because of Europe's complicated history, and by the way, including to some extent countries to the east, including Russia and Belarus, the idea that we know which speech is right and which speech is wrong, I mean, is more spread. I think that what we've seen is that, and we're talking about not only about COVID, we're also talking about what preceded COVID. We're talking about the troll factories in St. Petersburg that's been polluting discourses, especially in the European Union, at least for the last 7-8 years, since the beginning of Russian war with Ukraine. So what we've seen is that they use this narrowing of Western, or rather European debate, and they go into this vacuum. Oh, they say, you know, they're not telling you about this, about that, about migrants, about whatever. So we are telling you the truth. To use the expression of the Trump supporters in America, they are saying it as it is. I think that's exactly what promotes fissures in society. And I think that's how, by widening this debate, you disarm at least part of this hostile propaganda. I think that is at least part of the answer. It's not the whole answer.
Thank you very much. And as a good example, I would like to propose Deutsche Welle example. For example, Deutsche Welle, which is a German public broadcaster, opened itself to content creators, independent ones, and that allowed this television to open up for whole new topics of public debate and the whole variety of different opinions. And if you, for example, take a time to look at Deutsche Welle documentary YouTube channel, you will be amazed how much unprofessional, documentaries you may encounter, and that also adds to the understanding the variety of existing opinions and different perspectives.
Thanks for the plug of Deutsche Welle. I mean, it's it's been a pleasure to listen to. Just one thing to add, I think that, for example, the Russian service of Deutsche Welle took a conscientious decision to open up its content creation, or basically, especially its columns, its opinion section, to people of different views. I mean, you probably figured out I'm not exactly a social democrat from my views, but we have very left-wing feminists too. So it's quite a selection of views, and that inspires trust, I think.
Thank you. And we have time for one more question from the audience. It's not strictly within our frame of the topic. Still, economics are long used both as an instrument to divide and conquer and to unite neighbors. Nord Stream was mentioned during the discussion. How do we find a balance between divide and conquer and unite neighbors? Mr. Rustov, may I ask for your outtakes on that? We cannot hear you, apparently. Okay. I see that we have some technical problems. Mr. Biek, would you consider to jump in while Dr. Rustov is fixing his problems?
Okay. Well, I'm not a specialist in economy, but I'm observing for example, the European Union program of the recovery. Yes, this is, I think, a very good tool for the some cooperation between the different countries and between EU member states. Yes, because few national main points of this program, mainly related with the health and security systems. Yes, but there's one of the solutions how we can increase cooperation by this type of programs. Yes, maybe some regional programs like Baltic Sea States program of recovery after COVID can be also maybe some bilateral programs. Yes, for example, Poland and Lithuania program, which will increase cooperation and maybe increase the economic recovery after the COVID pandemic. I think that this type of programs can be a solution for for the problems with the economical aspects of the situation which we have. Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Arunas,
And
can I answer very shortly just one question which I saw? It's the same lady that asked me about democracy and stuff like that. She asked me about democratic debate in universities, and she asked me, should language that promotes harm of others, probably to others, be treated as equally valid narrative? Academic debate should be completely free. Yes, of course. Students should be treated as 3-year-old children and be hidden from real debate. I don't understand the concept of harm here. Harm is when someone is launching a grenade at you. That's harm.
And with that conclusion, I would like to close our panel discussion. We heard today about various good examples of civil society reacting to COVID-19 and other threats of today's world. Also, we talked about building up the trust, not relying necessarily on social media, which also is a threat by its nature to some degree. And we closed up with a necessity to respect and sustain open debate, despite some quite unflattering language we might encounter while searching for the common understanding. And with that, I would like to come back to you, Mr. Pamkos.
Thank you very much for that panel discussion. We now have in our schedule a 15-minute coffee break. Please get some coffee if you have some, make some, do whatever else you need to make phone calls. We will start again promptly at 11:30, so in exactly 15 minutes.